Okay. So welcome to the North Carolina Space Grant career panel. My name is James Ainsworth. I'm going to be the moderator for this session. A little bit about myself. I'm the Director of Engineering at Collier Aerospace. We have a new office in Raleigh, North Carolina. Got a long history with NC State and a long history with the North Carolina Space Grant. We sponsor a number of interns every summer through the Space Grant, and we use it as an active recruiting and hiring tool for our company. So we've hired a lot of new undergraduates through our internship program through the Space Grant. So I want to start off by saying thank you to the Space Grant institution for that. And so I guess we're going to go around the room and the virtual room that is, and just let all of the panelists introduce themselves. And we'll start off with Miss Diana Lai.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very excited to be here with you all today. My name is Diana Lee, and I'm currently the Deputy Division Chief of the Earth Science Division at NASA Ames Research Center in Silicon Valley. And so I've always really been interested in science and math because it came easy to me. And so I started my undergraduate thinking that I would be a pre-med student and go on to medical school. When I arrived in San Francisco to attend the University of San Francisco, one of my peers mentioned that she was going to intern at NASA. So growing up in Hawaii, I had no idea that NASA even existed in California, let alone there were 2 different NASA sites in California. So this really sparked my childhood dream of becoming an astronaut. And so at that time, she was attending community college, and I thought the only way to get my foot in the door was to also attend community college. So I made a transfer, and I did get the internship, thankfully, because then when I came back, I found out that I could still intern with NASA and be at the University of San Francisco. So I interned there for a few years, and then when I graduated, I came back as a contractor, and from there, started my science internships, testing biocompatibility for nanostats, and then also moving on to some shuttle payloads. After a few years, went on to do my MBA at the Santa Clara University, and there also moved on to civil service at NASA. And so becoming a civil servant, I was then the space biology deputy portfolio manager, where I had oversight of over 60 grants and payloads that were being implemented on the ISS. So really after 20 years in life science, I made the move over to earth science, where I now lead a group of scientists and engineers and also project managers in a whole different fields of science. And what really excites me the most about my job today is that I've been really fortunate to move around in the different science roles that I've had, and then help guide the early career folks now to accomplish their dreams. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess we'll move on to Miss Nancy Hall.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Yeah, like Deanna, I always had an interest in science since I was a kid. I love science fiction, Star Trek, Star Wars, Outer Limits. I loved, watching TVs, reading science fiction books. I also had a great 6th grade teacher who made learning science fun. We did lots of experiments in the classroom. She had lots of animals. She had hamsters, chameleon, fish tank. We covered just about every single topic in science. And it was in her class I really fell in love with astronomy and physics. So ever since I was in 6th grade, I knew I wanted to be a scientist. I wasn't sure which area, because I liked, we did some chemistry, we did some physics, we did different things. And it was about in high school when I started taking physics and chemistry and biology, I leaned more toward the physics area. So went to college with a major in space science, which was primarily physics, astronomy. And then my plan after college was to work for one of the aerospace companies, because I thought you had to be, really smart and really have a, PhD to work for NASA. But I was surprised, but I applied at all the NASA centers, and I actually got hired by NASA. It was Lewis at the time. It's now NASA Glenn in Cleveland, Ohio. And I grew up in New York, went to college in Florida, had never been in the state of Ohio, but I was just thinking, hey, it's NASA, I want to work for them. So moved to Ohio, have been here ever since. Started out as a research scientist, working on experiments that flew on the shuttle, and it was real neat working on the experiments. Some cases we got to train the astronauts. So I did research scientist work for about 14, 15 years, and then kind of went into the project management area where I was given more responsibilities and manage an experiment. And I had my most memorable experiment is one that launched last year. It was 10 years in the making, and we got to fly on the reduced gravity aircraft to do some testing. It launched last year in August, and right now it's operating on station, and we're getting data for the principal investigator. So that's a lot of fun, just seeing that whole process. So it's about me. Thanks.
Dr. Rachel Smith. We can't hear you. No audio. At least I don't hear you. Does somebody else?
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, we got you now.
Yep.
Sorry. Okay, fun with Zoom. All right. Hi everyone, Rachel Smith. Thanks for having me here. I'm also from New York, by the way. Yay. I actually took a kind of so I'm the head of the Astronomy and Astrophysics Research Lab and curator of Meteorites at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in Raleigh, and I have a joint appointment with Appalachian State. I'm a professor in physics and astronomy there, and adjunct professor at UNC Chapel Hill. And I kind of took a roundabout way to get here to astrophysics. I've always loved animals too. And I went to vet school first, went to biology major and undergrad, vet school. So I did both at Cornell University, and then realized after graduating and doing a brief internship, it wasn't really for me, honestly. And that's a totally other conversation. But I really love museums. I've always, growing up near New York City, love museums, and found myself working in a museum down here, not this museum, and eventually worked for some museum design companies and found my way back actually out to California. Half my family's from out there, and ended up working for a firm out there, but quickly kind of realized I wanted to go back to school and get a PhD. My father was an astronomer, and I've always been excited about space, but really that route, kind of what some other people were saying, that route to like get there seemed kind of a little obscure, and I had a biology background. But I ended up joining a group at UCLA and focused kind of on astrobiology, and ended up doing my thesis, my PhD in astrochemistry. And so right now I'm an observer. I study forming stars. And the group also had, my advisor was a cosmochemist, so worked with meteorites. And after I graduated in 2011 and started a postdoc at Caltech in planetary science. And then this job came up, which was like at a museum and a professor. And I was really excited about it. And I've been back here ever since, came from California, moved to North Carolina, and really love, I'd say what I love most about my job, being a curator, head of a lab with visualizations. And there's like exhibit opportunities and teaching students. I teach 2 classes. I was able to create astrobiology and star formation. And I love having excited students, and I really just love the variety of the job. So I get to have a space to engage visitors to see kind of cool visualizations. I'm on a couple projects with that, with like creating visuals for people to see, and also going to observe in Hawaii at big telescopes. That's really exciting. And so I love the variety of the work that I do. And so anyway, so that's kind of, I guess, about me. And I think I covered intro stuff. Let's say that.
No, that was great. Thank you. Let's move on to Miss Cindy Martin-Brennan.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. My name is Cindy Martin-Brennan. I'm with a company called Space Tango, And what we do is we do science and engineering. We put a lot of the research that Diana has worked on, stuff that Nancy's worked on. We work with folks like them, and we put the research on the International Space Station. So we're a small company based out of Lexington, Kentucky. And currently I'm on the board of directors of the company. But my career has really been kind of about a 35-year career in space industry. I started right out of school. I started with NASA right out of school at Kennedy Space Center. I was fortunate enough to be employed by NASA for several years. But really my career has been focused on doing research and development, kind of R&D in microgravity. That's been my thing. I have to make some admissions here that in my teen years and in grade school, I hated math. I hated science. I hated it. So I can't say that, at 6 years old or 8 years old, I was, motivated by STEM. Not at all. I think the thing that kind of made me think about STEM, and this sounds really cheesy, is Star Wars, right? So among the group here, I'm probably the older person in the group, and Star Wars was a big thing for me in the 70s. So that really turned my eye a little bit to my interest in STEM. But not enough when to go and pursue more math degrees, pursue math and physics in high school, not my thing. I moved to Florida, Central Florida. I started college at the University of Central Florida, and my original degrees were really art and journalism. I really loved to write. I really like to explore art. It wasn't until I took a prerequisite class in computer science that a light bulb went off. And I could see the connection between art and science. And that, I think that light bulb is really kind of what motivated me to get into STEM. The other part to that one singular class that kind of was a little life-changing for me is that the teacher, my professor, worked at Kennedy Space Center. And he took us on a field trip to Kennedy Space Center. And after that field trip, I came back, I changed my major. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. So I was a little bit of a late bloomer there. So it really wasn't until college that I really got interested in STEM. What got my foot into the door, like I said, I took the one class. I really set my sights on working for NASA. And I was fortunate enough, after I got my degree in computer science, my bachelor's, I was hired by NASA directly out of college, right at Kennedy Space Center, which I worked several years at Kennedy. And then I went up to NASA headquarters. So my career has been very across the world, working with Russia, Ukraine, Japan. I've been so fortunate in my career to do a lot of travel in aerospace and support a lot of research across the globe. What really kind of gets me excited, and from 20 years ago to this day, what really gets me excited is, again, 35 years in this industry, I've seen such growth from when I started in the mid 80s to what's going on now with the space industry, that huge growth that I've been a part of, contributing to, just more and more people being interested in space. I think that has just been the most fascinating, the most rewarding thing for me, is just to see this industry grow and more people being interested in the industry and seeing a lot of new leaders come online. So that's me in a nutshell.
It's a common theme of Star Trek and Star Wars fans. Maybe that's probably contributing to the interest in the space industry today.
Yeah. Go Mandalorian.
That's right. Yeah, Mandalorian. Mr. Jeff Mobley.
Yes, Jeff Mobley. I'm Senior Director of Electro-Mechanical Systems with Aerospace, right in Durham, North Carolina. North Carolina native, been in North Carolina my whole life. I would say I first got interested in engineering. I went to a camp during the summer, during high school, called Summer Ventures in Science and Math. And at one of those sessions of that, they presented a presentation on the International Space Station. And I was just fascinated by the International Space Station and the fact that that could possibly something I could work on one day. And that really got me interested in engineering. Started out at NC State in aerospace engineering. Decided I really liked the coursework and what would go on in mechanical engineering a little better than aerospace. Was afraid I might give up a career in aerospace in doing so, but was fortunate enough to still land myself in the aerospace industry. I was able to get a summer internship with a company in Durham that made mechanisms for space. And was able to, through that, to get a full-time job coming out of school with that company, worked for 6 years doing that, just developing my expertise as an engineer and designing those mechanisms. Did about a 5-year stint in automotive, and then was able to get back together at a different company with a lot of those same folks and continue my career working on motors, gear motors, actuators, gimbals, that would move anything that would move something in space. And have been fortunate to do that for the rest of my career and kind of move up from designing more simple mechanisms to more complex mechanisms, and then move into management and kind of oversee teams that are doing that work. And I would say what kind of excites me about it right now is there's a massive push to commercialization of space, and that's just opening the door for so many companies to get involved. Our company, Aerospace, has a Dream Chaser vehicle that's going to be flying cargo to space station and flying people in and out of space soon, and working on space habitats, and just the opportunities for so many companies now to get involved in the space industry is just really exciting for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Like to echo that. I mean, there's a lot of the private space companies are making big moves, and I know Aerospace is one of them. Did a lot of work on the Dream Chaser early on in my career. So it's First Lieutenant.
Yes, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. My name is First Lieutenant Nicole Quattrocki, and I'm in the US Space Force. And I did want to preface by saying that I don't have an impressive 30-year career to tell you about, but the perspective that I do hope to share is someone that just recently went through the transition from undergraduate to, a real job for the first time not too long ago, like many of you will soon do. So I graduated from the US Air Force Academy in 2018 with a bachelor's in business management. So that's also, I think, a little bit unique. I found my way into STEM, not through a technical degree. I did with my first duty station at Los Angeles Air Force Base. I'm still stationed there now, but I've done a couple jobs since then. First working on the GPS mission, first on the ground segment side, command and control, and then moved over to the space vehicle side and got to help with the production of the main payloads on that vehicle. And then most recently with the stand-up of the Space Force, I cross-commissioned over. And so now I'm in the Space Force and work on a program that's tackling space debris remediation. And so project management work on that, not just from a technical perspective, but also all the other hurdles that come with it, like the legal challenges, international, economic, and all of that. And happy to be here, happy to help answer questions, not just today, but as I said, as I recently went through this transition, if there's anything we can do to continue the conversation as you guys make that transition, I'd love to continue that.
So thanks for the great introductions. I guess we'll start in. There's been a lot of questions flying in here, so I'm just going to start with kind of go down the list. In retrospect, what is the one thing you would have done to better prepare yourself for the position that you are in now? And I'll let anyone who would like to answer, go ahead. Well, I can start. I'll just take this one. I think learning how to automate tasks and any kind of scripting tool or anything else you can pick up as an undergraduate student. I always tell the guys working here at our company, if you're doing the same thing more than once, figure out how to automate it. So automation for me is like the one thing that I would have probably spent more time learning when I was in school.
I'll jump in. I'll say perhaps getting a little more hands-on experience, especially while in school. I know there's so much more opportunities for that these days, but I look back and realize some of the things I didn't participate in that would have been awesome, like some of the Formula SAE or Baja Club teams, things like that, or just finding opportunities to really seek out ways to kind of get your hands dirty and get involved in projects that are more hands-on as opposed to the theoretical.
Yeah, one thing I would add is try to do an internship while you're in school. Because I was an out-of-state student, I didn't have access to a car. So I didn't go for any internship because I thought I needed that. And I've had several interns, and it's amazing how many comes from out of state. They don't have a car, but they find ways to get around. And then the experience you get from doing the internship is great. So that's one thing I would say. If you have an opportunity, do that.
Yeah, so Nicole, kind of interesting background you have, Nicole, from the business. So I sort of now I'm, in a company, and Jeff touched on it as well, as commercial space is really a big thing. It's just not the federal government going to space station, launching anymore. Is companies like mine, companies like Jeff. And so why I had the engineering, the technical base, I really would have enjoyed more of the business space, right? How do you form a business relationship? How do you form a joint venture? All of those type of new things that, again, you have the technical piece, but the business side of it, I really wish I would have kind of paid attention a little bit more there. And I'm a little bit jealous of you, Nicole, that you were smart enough to choose that path.
And I would like to add just one thing: networking, making, along the same lines of internships and getting a good mentor, and really networking with your peers. So if there are conferences that you can attend and meet other folks, other students like you, and then, maybe graduate mentors, and then also, of course, your professors and folks that are in the field, right? Network.
Yeah, get involved in your industry. What's the, where are people, sharing ideas? What conferences are the best ones to go to? People love talking about their work and their job. If you just want to show up and listen, you can build your network pretty easily, I feel. I'm going to go to the next question. In terms of workplace culture, do you work more independently or work with a team? Is your position project-based or more routine? Can you talk a little bit more about a day-to-day work, what a day-to-day looks like in your workplace? That's a loaded question, I feel.
I could answer some of this, I guess, or start. So I get this question a lot, actually, of what's a day in the life, and I just want to say, job, a lot of times it's hard to define that. So I have to say that, and part of the reason I like the job I have is there isn't one single same, the days are different. And academia, there are pros and cons to all types of jobs, like academia versus industry. And this is a really awesome, diverse panel. I have like a million questions for everybody else, but I won't ask them because I'm not supposed to do that. But I would just say that one nice, being able to manage your own schedule is really important. Just getting a little back to the last question, because the days are different, and depending on the projects, they're different. And team, I sometimes work with a team. I sometimes work by myself. Being an astronomers tend to have smaller teams, say, than like big field research teams, but I often have teams of students. I have interns, I have collaborators, but they're probably smaller teams on the order of 2 or 3 people at a time. So I think having a skill set that enables you to do both of those things is really important. And it's very hard to define a single day. Similarly, it's hard to define a single path to get somewhere. So often I get asked, how do I get there? And certainly you wouldn't want to take my route necessarily. I first went to become a vet, and now I'm here. So, unless you want to do all of the different things, but it's, I think you just, so it's hard to define that. And for me, at least, there is no single day. Often I'm checking emails a lot of the time, things that aren't terribly interesting, or writing and then teaching and everything. And I think, and I would say there is no single routine to getting at that. It's an interesting question, actually. Project oriented for me anyways, that the end goal is important. And when I hire students, and I've actually worked with Space Grant a lot in hiring students, I usually want to get people to have a project, have an end goal, and figure out their own path with guidance to get there, because I think that's a really important skill to have, is to be able to know what you need to do and figure out how you can get there most efficiently. So for me, there's not really a lot of routine involved there, except, using some of the skills, like typing is good skill since you'll use that for everything these days. So, these are great questions. But I think so I would just say those are my answers for that. I don't know, everyone may have a different answer. So.
Yeah, I would say for me, I work more as a team because because most of my projects involve designing an experiment to meet the objective of a principal investigator, working with an engineering team, to get it built, to get the design, to get it built, to do testing, and then launch it. So you're always working with the team. Even if I'm doing things independently, for example, I have to prepare monthly reports that I present monthly, I still have to go to individuals to get the information. So there's not really anything routine, but I would say there's things we do on a regular basis. Like I have a weekly stand-up meeting with my teams where I get a status of what's going on this system, what's going on in that system. Monthly, I give a report. Some of my individual teams, like the software team, they have their own monthly meetings and I get information on them. For example, last week, we had a safety walkthrough. We had a system in the lab. We moved from one room to another, and NASA requires us to have a safety permit. So after we moved that, we had a safety walkthrough where the safety folks comes in. That's not something you do all the time, but if you're moving to a new room, you need to get all that done. So for the most part, that's kind of what, the question disappeared here. I forgot the rest of it, but yeah, that's basically what we do here. I would not say it's routine, but there are things we do that we schedule regularly. But yeah, in the morning when I get into work, first thing I do is check my schedule, see if I have a meeting scheduled, then check emails, and then go from there. But the other comment that Rachel made that I really like is setting my own schedule, deciding what I'm going to work on. I tend to prioritize things and then work on the things that's needed more, but you really, you set your own schedule, and I like doing that.
I can jump in. I would say for us here, it's a good mixture of individual work and teamwork, and you have to be able to do both. We have about 70 people in this office. We work everything from clean sheet of paper, custom design, all the way through assembly and test to deliver to customers. And a lot of people have to work together on those projects as a team. Now, each individual will have their own responsibilities and duties to accomplish in that, but then they have to come together as a team. And so that your engineering side and your manufacturing side and your test side and your procurement folks are all working together toward a common goal and all interacting quite a bit throughout the process while still pulling their own weight for their individual tasks. And, one of the beautiful things we have is, when you talk about what's a day in the life, fortunately for us, it's never the same. It's something different every day. You're looking at different tasks every day. You're not repetitively doing the same thing over and over again, which kind of makes it really exciting.
I'm going to change up the question here. I think there's been a lot of questions coming in. I'm trying to find a common thread and just kind of cut to the chase and maybe try to answer it with one question and one response from everyone. Really, I think most people that are attending this just want to know how to set themselves apart and get hired. They want to get their first job, and once they get their first job, they want to be successful at it. They want to know what they need to do to set themselves apart. And what advice could you give these folks that are graduating and looking for jobs to A, get hired? That's step one. And B, once you get hired, to excel and to find what they're good at and make themselves happy, as well as be successful in their career. Do you guys have any words of wisdom for that?
Well, I'll take this. Oh,
there we go. That's a good question. That's what people are trying to answer.
I'll take it first. First, I think the job market is hot right now because of these commercial space platforms that are coming online, the stuff that our company's doing, NASA. I have never seen the aerospace industry hire as rapidly as they do. There was just a meeting last week in Colorado, Space Symposium, and for the first time ever, I've seen people actually go to the symposium. Some of the leaders, some of the middle managers actually make job offers on the spot without interviews, anything. So it is a very hot job market right now. What we look at for, how, what makes you interesting to us, right? Why what's going to set you apart? A lot of it is I think Nancy talked about it, is sort of the internships, whether they're internships that were related to your field, but the fact that you've held a job, you have communication skills, I think that really kind of helps a lot, that you have shown, yes, you have a diploma. The diploma definitely shows that you have the ability to learn and you have some basis in the field to which your diploma or certificate in. But the really important thing for us is like sort of that job experience. You may not have it directly, but to have some sort of job experience. But probably the skills that we look for is your ability to communicate, because as we kind of talked earlier about, you heard the word teaming coming through. Space is not, you work independently, but space is really a team sport. You are working with scientists, you're working with engineers, you're working with the rocket vehicles, you're working with the platform, you're working with NASA. It is a huge team sport, space is. So that ability to communicate and articulate, that is really what we're really going to be keen on. Again, of course, we're going to look at your diploma, but hey, you got the diploma, we know you know your stuff. But that ability to communicate and work in teams, that is super critical to where we are right now. And you guys are all in a great position, because I think hiring is amazing right now. It's a very hot field, and I'm sure Jeff can add to as well, because they're hiring like gangbusters at Aerospace as well.
Yes, and I'll echo what you said. Yes, I mean, yes, we're hiring tremendously. Done a lot of interviews recently. Certainly communication skills is the number one thing you look for. If you can't carry on a conversation with a candidate, you know, then there's not much chance of moving past that. But certainly you want to look for, you know, some substance behind that ability to communicate. And, you know, we're finding that even many times, even our interns are coming to us with prior internships. It's a hot market, but it's for premium jobs, it's still a competitive market. So, you know, certainly students want to build upon really applicable internships, really go after internships that interest you, or go after projects at school that interest you. Like I said, hands-on work is really important. A lot of times showing you have the ability not just to theorize it in your head, but to apply it in reality. And the ability to both work independently and with other people, you know, to be kind of self-starters, that you're not going to be sitting around waiting for someone else to give you work, but you're going to go actively look out work, that you're going to actively try to solve problems yourself without just kind of get lost in solving problems yourself. You know, having that ability to evaluate for yourself what you can solve and evaluate who you need to go out and seek out to solve problems and work with. And I know a lot of times we talk about kind of networking and mentors, and certainly finding people that have gone before you and making those connections can be inroads into some of these key companies that are really of interest to go work for.
Nicole, are you wanting to contribute? I see you're unmuting a couple of times.
Yeah, sorry, I think I stepped on a few people earlier, but I think one piece of practical and also humbling advice that I received earlier on is just the idea of doing things that you don't want to do, but still doing them well. I think, and I think this goes beyond just blooming where you're planted, right? Everyone says that, but as I think Cindy mentioned earlier, like having the degree and the experience, that's all, you know, if you want to set yourself apart amongst your peers that already have those things, every job is going to have aspects that you don't always enjoy, and that's the reality. And so the sooner you can, I guess, get over that, the better. But then, you know, learning how to do those things, every job that you don't want to do, and still, you know, giving it your all, applying yourself 100% to those tasks the same way you would to those tasks that you're incredibly passionate about. I think that will definitely set you apart from your peers. And then also to echo on the communication that was mentioned earlier, 2 points. I think concision is really important, learning the balance between the amount of words that you're going to share, but still getting, you know, not taking up too much time, getting all the details, the relevant details in there. And then also knowing who you're talking to, knowing who your audience is, because the way that I communicate with an engineer is different than the way I would communicate with a senior leader. You know, the level of detail will be different. And also, you know, the things that each are concerned with is going to be different too. So just 2 points on communication as well.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add for somebody new coming out of university and going into their first, you know, couple of years of their career, take ownership of anything and everything, you know, and take responsibility for stuff that maybe you didn't even do. You know, you're not taking blame, but you're you're accepting where the reality of the situation of where your group is in at the point at that point in time, and you're working toward a solution instead of saying, I didn't do that, that's not my problem. That's the last thing that any person managing a team wants to hear. Take ownership, take responsibility, accept where you are, and try to work toward improving it. Everyone's going to appreciate that and see that effort. And I think that's, in my mind, one of the key qualities that sets new hires apart. Cool. Does anyone else have any questions that they want to ask? I mean, the panelists, do you guys want to pose a question to the rest of the panelists? I have a list here.
I think one of the questions that popped up was, how can people find mentors and how can they network? And one of the ideas that just came to me is, sometimes you're presently in school with those people that you can network with. I mentioned, things like joining a high-powered rocketry team or a Formula SA team or something like that's part of your program. And many times those are opportunities to engage in upperclassmen. And then those upperclassmen go and get internships. And then those interns recommend you for a subsequent internship. I mean, we love it when we get interns recommending other interns to us, because those are people they've already worked with, they know how they work, and they can give us, some real input on students even for an internship that beats just an interview. So just look for any opportunity to network with people, even if they're 1, 2, 3 years ahead of you.
And you wouldn't recommend somebody you didn't want to work with. So.
I sure hope not.
Yeah, same here. We have interns that recommend other interns, and they go to the top of the list. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you're interested in science and research, there is a group. So there's professional societies too that have very active student groups. Nancy knows where I'm going to go with this. There's a group called the American Society for Gravitational and Space Research. So if research and development, microgravity engineering, building things in microgravity, doing science in microgravity research, that is a very good group to look at. They have a very active student organization. The acronym is ASGSR.org. You can go to their website, but it's the American Society for Gravitational and Space Research for those who are interested in doing engineering and research and development in space. So that's a good organization. AIAA, American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, also has a very active student organization. So there's quite a few professional societies out there. I could go on, but those two come to the top of my head about finding networking and mentoring and kind of being able to go to some of these meetings if they're local to your area. Sometimes you can even apply for grants to go to the meetings. That really kind of gets you a lot kick-started with finding some of these mentors and also networking.
Yep, and Cindy brings up a lot of good points about different places to find it. I was a member of AIAA when I was in college, and actually got to go to my first conference. AIAA funded it. There was, I think 8 of us. We went in 2 cars. We were in Florida. The conference was in Georgia, and we drove there. AIAA covered the cost of our hotel, and we got to network and meet other people. So that's one way to do it. And actually, a few months ago, I had a high school student contact myself and another coworker saying they were reading about some research we were doing. Are there any opportunities for internship? So yeah, if there's an area you're interested in and you see NASA doing work, by all means, send them an email and say, hey, I'm interested in this. And then, like I said, all of you guys who are interning, that also sets you apart because it shows you have the initiative and you're trying to learn. And I think it was Nicole who mentioned that, even if it's something you don't like, do it well. One of the neat things with internship is you get to find out, is this an area I want to go into? And it may not be, but that's a good time to find out, while you're in college interning and realizing, well, I don't, because I had a student who thought she wanted to do chemical engineering, then realized, oh, I like the chemistry aspects of it more. So that's another good way to find out, is this what I really want to do? And then, like I said, in addition to finding people in the field, you can ask questions and be mentors.
One question I find is probably a pretty common that people want to know is, what are some key skills and traits that your organization is looking for in potential candidates? And I'll actually direct this at Ms. Diana Lee, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So some of the skills our organization is looking for, is being organized, being able to communicate, and then also being a self-starter, right? So some of the skills that folks here have already mentioned, but this is really important for any job. And the thing with civil service and working at NASA is the directions of NASA goals could change, right, with each administration. So with that uncertainty, you have to be able to adapt and make sure that your skills can move with the way the winds are blowing. But then there are also some positions, within our field that are very specialized, right? And so if there is a science or an engineering area where it's very technical, sometimes we are very looking for some of those very specialized skills as well.
Anyone else want to contribute? Skill sets that you're looking for in new hires?
Well, I'll just say one quick thing, if that's okay. Sorry. Just in terms of science, a lot of people, and this is true for the public too, they think science is all about making discoveries every day or something like that. And this happens, I work at a museum where even the communications team asks us weekly what we've discovered. So I just want to emphasize that that's not what science is really at all. And so there are tedious, I cannot agree more with the folks who have said, do things you don't want to do. There are tedious things to every job. It is not all glamorous and discoveries and getting an article or something. So if you're asked to do a spreadsheet, if you're asked to organize something, if these are things that I hire, that I would do, but I don't always have time, that I am not, and nothing should be beneath you to do as a student. And it shouldn't be grunt. I mean, of course, you shouldn't be asked to do real grunt work that's not part of your job description, but at the same, a spreadsheet, getting files together, things that are really connected that seem boring. Honestly, they are boring because we all do it. And that leads to things, the more you do of that and the higher up you get and the more skills you get, the more you don't have to do a lot of this, or you just get faster and better at it. And so even though we're in, everyone on the panel has like a lot of responsibility and has teams and different projects, we all do things, every one of us, that seem maybe tedious. And so that's really important to know as a student coming in, because what happens is if students don't want to do it or they do a poor job, nobody wants that person on their team because you won't be given more tasks to do that are more interesting because you didn't do the first thing. So I just want to emphasize that too, especially with science, because a lot of times I get students who, or not, I wouldn't say a lot, but even in laboratory work, I had students work at JPL through a grant of mine. And there's a lot of, you're going in late and turning screwdrivers or whatever. It was my colleague's lab, but it's a lot of time. And in the end, it looks great on a resume and the work is really interesting, but there's still a lot of time spent in the lab doing stuff that maybe didn't occur to some people beforehand. So, but in any case, I just think that's really important. And also, as far as mentoring, don't be shy when you go to conferences of introducing yourself to people. We're all regular people. So if students come up to me really enthused and want to talk to me and know at least what I do, that's great. And I'll be happy to talk to them, but don't only just hang out with students, branch out, go out of your comfort zone and talk to people. And the colleagues that I have now, I started making connections when I was in grad school, and it takes years to build relationships. So start now, reach out, and I just encourage students to do that and not be scared about doing that. So that's all I want to say.
I do want to add something specific to the skill set, more on the engineering side, what we look for. So we look for those engineers, and Jeff sort of alluded to it, that have gotten their hands dirty a little bit, right? So, somebody can put down on a piece of paper, great, go to CAD CAM, put together, all of their, great engineering design, but that person who kind of knows that this is the right pump and that's the right pump, if you've got your hands dirty at some point, that's really kind of what we look for. A lot of the work that we do is R&D. We'll take a material like a PDMS material is something we've been looking at. We're looking at different geometrics of doing some stuff for the microfluidics we do. But what we've also found out is the ability to test and document your testing. That's like super important, because somebody will take something to the bench and they'll play with it and come back and say, hey, this worked this way. Well, we need proof of that, how that worked, why it worked. Did you test it properly? And so it seems to be a little bit of a gap when we see some of the engineers come to us, that kind of the ability to kind of sit back, do their design, test the design, document that testing is super critical for us and R&D. And so I've seen a lot of gap in that area with regards to engineering of late. But yeah, getting your hands dirty and knowing how to document your work is super important.
Yeah, I'd like to just add to that. The difference I see in very new engineers coming out of school versus someone who's 3, 5, 6 to 10 years experience or more is their ability to not just look at the task that they're trying to do, but ask questions to figure out, well, what is this person going to do with what I'm producing? And is what I'm producing really what they need? And if it's not, give them something else that's better, right? Ask, I'm going to do something for you and hand it off. But if you don't know what that person's going to do with it, you're doomed. You're gonna fail, because you're gonna give them something that in the end of the day they don't really need, or it's not as good as it could be. So ask questions. Ask, if somebody asks you to do something, hey, what are you gonna do with it? Tell me what's the next step. Maybe I can improve upon. Maybe I can give you something you haven't thought of. Because I mean, a lot of times kids coming out of school are better at the tool sets. We only know Excel, and these others, they know better tools than we do. They could provide us something better if they would just ask questions about why we're asking them to do something, what we're going to do with it after we get it. So
I do think
that wasn't a question, more of a statement.
This question may be answered differently, certainly by everyone in the room and by every employer. But some of the things we would look for, there are times when you really want some specific skills and expertise, for a particular position. But other times we're really looking for somebody who has a diverse range of abilities, who can perform multiple tasks. We may, for instance, want to hire a material science engineer to do really focusing on materials, but we only need that person to do that maybe 2/3 of their job. And then we have to find something else for them to do for the other 1/3 of their job until maybe our business model grows to the point we can support that role full time. And so then when we're deciding between candidates, the candidate that shows they have some other skills we can utilize in other areas will stand out above a candidate that can really only focus in one area. So anything students can do to broaden their horizon, not necessarily take one class in every discipline out there, but to have, either a major and a minor, or a major and then maybe a focal group of electives that kind of shows a different skill set. To really offer an employer, multiple skills as opposed to just one. We've also numerous times we've interviewed people for one position, and through the interview decided, wow, we really like them. Let's hire them for this other position. And it may be something different than they walked in the door to interview for. They interviewed for an electrical engineering position and we hired them as a program manager. So be open to those things and open to alternate career paths, because employers may see something in you that you may not see in yourself.
Another question in the chat. How do you suggest that students develop their communication skills in terms of their own elevator speeches? Lightning talks are good for them to describe their research. The lightning talks, are they good? Or I guess how to develop your communication? I guess that's a hard question.
I could try there, because I work at it, because being in a museum, you have to talk to the public all the time. And I try to get my students to go from an academic version of what they're talking about to the public version, because, and one thing to know about audiences is we are all audiences, even scientists. So the less complicated version will be better received. If people don't understand what you're saying, they won't think. What happens with that is that they don't feel that person's very smart who's telling them. They'll feel they don't understand it and they don't like it. This is just psychology of audiences. And it's true for scientists and the public. So I would say, and it's funny about the elevator speech, because I had students in an elevator and with another scientist telling them to give their elevator speech, and they did okay, but it was actually in a real elevator. But it's hard to do, and I would say keep it as simple as you can. And imagine you're talking to a close friend who's not a scientist, or a family member who's not a scientist, and do that actually, and ask them if it makes sense. Does what I'm saying make sense? Did I use words that are jargon? Because it doesn't. What sometimes happens is students coming from intense academic departments are trained. We're trained to be smart and show that we know a lot of things. But if you're talking to an audience, knowing your audience, as someone else said, is super important. Talking to an audience, you have to know that audience to communicate to that audience, and you have to decide what you want them to take away. And so that's really important. And keeping it simple and to the point and relevant to that person is the most important thing. And and it could be 2 seconds, it could be 30 seconds, it could be an hour that you have, but making it important to them. Why should they care about what you're saying? And that's, it's a hard skill, and I'm still learning. I mean, everybody still learns throughout their lives, but it's one of the most important things is to make whoever you're talking to, have them care about what you're saying and listen. And that isn't using the most complicated terms you can think of. Because people don't know that. And again, like I said, what happens is they don't care about it and they'll walk away. And so in their mind, they'll walk away too. They might zone out or something. So that's what I would say, is just keep it and practice on a friend who's not a scientist, not in the field, someone you can trust to give you an honest opinion that they're not just going to say it's great. So that's really important to do. And it's a great question, because it's one of the most important things you can develop is how to communicate with different audiences and make yourself relevant to whoever you're talking to listen to you and give you opportunities and stuff.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Rachel, what she's saying. And I would also add, definitely practice on different groups of people. One of the things I do as part of my job that I enjoy is I go out and talk to the public. So, I work in the area of what we call microgravity, which is looking at what happens when you're in a reduced gravity environment. And I've given talks about what I do to kids from first grades all the way through high school. And over the years, I've kind of learned what to focus on. With the younger kids, I do more hands-on type things. For example, I'll do one right here where I tell the kids, do you realize that every one of you have experienced what it's like to be an astronaut? And I have them stand up, jump in the air, and tell them that split second that you were in the air, you were basically in free fall because the force of gravity is pulling you down. So I take and then I adapt the activities to the age level. And I've done talks to like youth groups, to the elderly, you just about all different areas. I'd say practice it. If you have an opportunity, and a lot of universities have service organization, practice talking to those groups, because communication is important. Because you may at one point be talking to your peers about what you're doing, but then later on, you may have to go report to management and advocate for funding. And they need to understand what you're doing. And if you go and get too technical on them, like, okay, well, they may know what they're doing, but why should I fund this? So practice, work with different people, and practice with your friends. And I like the idea of practicing with family. I do that because I have a lot of family members who likes the fact that I work for NASA, and I'm always trying to explain things to them, because for my family, anything that happens with NASA, they immediately come to me, even though I'm not working that area. And right now, with all the different folks involved in space, SpaceX launches, they say, oh, congratulations, you guys did. No, that wasn't us, but thank you, so just practice, talk to different groups, and that helps out with your communication skills.
Yeah, and I would like to add real quickly, what Rachel said about always learning to communicate better. That's very true, because recently I went through a coaching session where my coach asked me, to build my personal brand. And I'll put in the chat here an article that he provided to me, but really storytelling is one of the best ways to communicate. And so thinking, through your life, how you've come to where you are, and the stories that make you who you are today, and then being able to craft that and tell that to others, and practicing and telling those stories in different settings, and that will really help you with your communication.
Sounds like we have a few more minutes. We want to extend this. Oh, we go to 4:55, so we have another 10 minutes. Perfect. I guess we want to maybe try to address the last few questions here in the chat. I'll just start at the top. What brings you the most joy about your job? Is there a particular story that you can share that made you think, this is why I love doing this?
I was actually just typing this. I also listened to what Diana said, and I agree with her 100%. By the way, I just want to say story, huge. And a story is not once upon a time. A story is just making it interesting. Make what you're saying interesting. But if I could just say a real quick, I love sharing what is exciting for me with other people. So whether it's my project, whether it's observing some data, which may look boring, I love trying to make that exciting for people, like some spectrum, which is a bunch of lines. To me, that's super cool. And I want to make everyone think it's cool. So I love doing that. And I was just writing something about a meteorite I just got for the museum that has amino acids in it. And I think it's so cool. And I really just was excited to share it the first thing. So I think for me, sharing exciting stuff with others like you guys, like everyone here, is really exciting. And also, and I could probably just delete what the long essay I was writing, but, and also just being able to manage my own time. I have a lot of animals at home. I love spending time with them. I like having my own schedule. And so making sure to get that, I make sure I meet all my deadlines ahead of time and give people what they need so that nobody wonders or I don't have to, I'm able to still manage my time. So I think it's a privilege to be able to do that. For me, I still feel this way, even though, most people don't care whether I'm 9 to 5 or whatever, but it is a privilege to be able to do that. So I try to do the best I can for everything so that I don't have to, pick up slack that was my responsibility that I didn't do. So those are like some big things that I really love about my job. I would just say, I'll delete all this stuff that I was rambling about. Okay.
I can maybe add something here. I didn't want to pile too hard on the teamwork that we were talking about earlier, but in terms of what I think brings me the most joy in my job, it really is the ability to work on a team and know that my contributions to the team make the team better and their contributions to the team make me better. And a quick story, I mentioned earlier that I used to work on the GPS mission in the Air Force and Space Force, and specifically on launching the next generation of space vehicles in the GPS constellation. And just a couple of friends from school that are now pilots were telling me about some story that they were landing in some austere location, and they had to do a different sort of approach to the airfield because they didn't have a certain number of GPS vehicles in their line of sight. And so that was just a really cool conversation for me to have, that like, oh my gosh, those are vehicles that like I've, small part, but helped develop and launch those. And those are assets that you guys are actually using out in the field and that, make a real tangible difference in their lives and their safety. And so that's what brings me a lot of joy, is knowing that my contributions make, to the team make us all better, and vice versa.
All right, we'll go to the next one. You have very intense, important work roles. How do you cope with the stress? Are there lessons learned for current students with finals coming up and projects due? Stress never goes away, so don't expect it's not a way to cope with it. Don't expect it to go away.
I was going to say, it's a personal thing. It's a personal journey. Work-life balance is important. That said, I just want to say, and that means, you have to take time for yourself. If you can't, you have to take a break. You have to get up. You can't sit for 12 hours straight, or maybe you can. I mean, everybody's different. That said, I just want to mention, sometimes I found that some students what work-life balance means is not prioritizing, is still meeting your commitments. So make sure that when you should have a personal life. You should make time for yourself. If you are stressed, take a break. go do something you enjoy, yoga, whatever. But always try to meet your commitments, because what happens is it's very hard for professors, for supervisors to evaluate different reasons why something didn't get done. So, stuff happens in life, and we all understand that. We all have personal lives that are separate from work. But I would say make sure to keep time for yourself, try to meet your commitments as best you can, and really try to, it's a lifelong process to get that balance. So it's not like we all do it perfectly necessarily because we're here, but it's important to have that. So anything you enjoy doing, make time to do it while still trying to be the best professional you can be, whether you're a student or an employee somewhere. And it can be tricky. It's a skill, I think, balancing everything. And don't get yourself so incredibly stressed that you can't do anything. That is not a good state to be in. And I think I've seen students get very stressed, and so you don't want that. But it's a personal thing. It's like, it's hard to advise one person the same as another person. It just depends on kind of how one handles stress, and everybody's different. And so I would say just kind of internalize what you need, and while still trying to do your best job and try to get that balance. I don't know if that's helpful, honestly, but that's
I would also add to take things a little bit in bite-sized pieces too, because it can be super overwhelming if you've got a lot of priorities that to you may be all the absolute highest priority. Just kind of take one piece at a time, accomplish one thing at a time, kind of break it down a little bit so you don't get overwhelmed with the amount of tests coming up, your workload, the different projects coming in. Just try to break it down in like bite-sized pieces. And that's, that to me has helped me a lot. So I don't sit back and look at the big picture and like, oh my God, I got all this stuff going on. Just kind of take it in small pieces, like a day at a time. You hear that, but it really, really helps. And then also with problems, my experience is when I'm like super intent on a problem, trying to solve a problem, the minute I break free from that problem, the minute I step away from that problem, do something, go for a walk, is when the brain seems to free up and think better. So also keep that in mind. Just if you're so intent on something, just take that moment to let it go. And you'll be amazed what kind of comes rushing in when you're not thinking about it. But so there are two things, small bite-sized pieces and things, and just once in a while free yourself from that problem, because that's probably where you find your solutions.
Yeah,
Cindy, that's small bite-sized pieces is a good strategy. I mean, you relieve stress by accomplishment. And if you're thinking too macro level, you're not going to get there for a longer period of time. So it's easier to become overwhelmed. If you're feeling stressed, make a checklist and make a to-do list for today, and put stuff on there you've already done and check it off. And you can be like, I did that today. I feel good.
I was just going to say that, but I thought it was a little bit cheating. If you did it, then you crossed it off. But I do that.
I do that. I mean, it's a good way of coping, I think.
Yeah, and I was going to add, sometimes you can use different tools, whether it's a schedule or just, reminders and things like that. That helps you with projects. I'll admit I'm one of these folks who tends to take too many on. Try to delegate, get people to help you so you're not totally overwhelmed. And then definitely with coping with stress, several people mentioned it, take time off for yourself. Find something you enjoy doing, whether it's, yoga, playing a musical instrument or something, and then, totally immerse yourself in that and try not to think about, work and things like that. And that helps out a lot, but definitely the small portions, listing it down, because it's kind of neat when you finish and accomplish something and you can check it off, you feel like, yes, I've done it. And that actually helps you. So those are some of the things I've done, just to help relieve stress. And then just trying to, if the weekend comes, okay, I'm not going to look at this. I'm not going to open the computer. I'm just going to go spend a weekend with the family. We're going to go to the park and walk and, just enjoy yourself. So that helps too.
And I would say that this kind of goes in line with the question before. One of the ways you can deal with stress is to have joy at work. If the most joyful moment of your day is 5 o'clock when you walk home every day or leave the office every day, that's probably not going to relieve your stress. And that's probably not the job you need to be in long term. but to find those moments of joy at work, whether they be little things or maybe it's a big picture joy that you can look at, so I like to break things up into small tasks, but also, sometimes having the big picture goal in perspective kind of helps you get through some menial stressful times, and look at the big things that are accomplished by what you're doing, and celebrate accomplishments. I know early on when we had a much smaller office, every time we delivered a piece of hardware, we would go out and launch a rocket just to celebrate delivering that hardware, and so look for ways to celebrate successes, especially with the people around you.
Hey, Joby, I see you.
Yeah,
Came on.
everyone say hi to Joby. She just appeared. Hi, Joby. You're muted, Joby.
Leave it to me to be the one to be on mute. Classic Joby move. 2 years with Zoom and I still haven't gotten that right. But I wanted to thank especially the career panelists for joining us today, because our goal in developing our agenda this year was to try to find a host of different professionals from a variety of discipline areas, because our students embrace STEM, from earth sciences to engineering and everything in between. And so we wanted to give them an opportunity to see how they can contribute to this booming workforce that's out there, which I'm very happy to hear. And I hope that they take advantage of some of the feedback and advice and tips and tricks that you all have suggested. So I really do thank you for joining us today. And thank you, James, for leading the session today and contributing also for what's going on at Collier Aerospace.